So a big welcome, and what we're going to do, we've got four speakers this morning, and I'm going to start off, Jacques, before you come on stage, I just want to give you a bit of insight, and guys, to all of you out there, please apologize, I've got a lot of paperwork around me this morning. I don't want to miss anything out that's really important, but a bit about Dr. Jacques Slaymon. He's the Medical Director of Agility Health. Dr. Slaymon is a renowned expert in various fields of clinical pharmacology and has significantly contributed to the advancements of clinical pharmacology in South Africa, with qualifications including a bachelor's, a master's degree in pharmacological medicine, and a medical degree, all obtained from the University of Pretoria. So, Jacques, please join me. We're really grateful to have you on board this morning. Jacques.
Good morning. Yes, sort of just struggling there with the button as always, but got it done.
Jacques, we've learned over the past, we've seen some funny things, and there's one thing we do know, and like we all know, is that when it comes to technology, you know, where things happen. But it's good to have you, Jacques. You know, I've met you before, and I know a lot about you and what you've done in your life and what you have done for many people and businesses out there. And I know you have a very strong passion towards that SME environment, and of course the employee well-being in an SME environment. So Jacques, to you, a very big welcome, and thank you for being part of us this morning.
Thank you.
Jacques, I've got a couple of, you know, as I said, this panel discussion is a very different panel. We don't have everyone up on the screen at the same time. It just allows for continuity and also to be crystal clear in our messaging. Jacques, I've got a couple of questions I'd like to put forward to you, of course. Jacques, what particular trends have you seen emerge since the start of the pandemic, especially when it comes to mental health and employee well-being?
Yeah, Mike, I think one needs to see this holistically, because it's the impact of the workplace on the employee, but also the impact of society on the employee, and obviously then the knock-on effect into the workplace. So if you just, let's start with a clinical basis, and we look around us. I mean, we had the naysayers again in the beginning, and then we had realistic stats coming on later. And now that we've almost through the fourth wave, we now know this. I mean, patients with chronic diseases and those with older than 50, pushing 60 and older, those are the vulnerable parts of the population, in the sense of that they have chronic diseases, and because of the chronic diseases, they tend to be more hospitalized, and they also, that is where you see the highest number of people dying. Having said that, that doesn't sort of make those younger ones invincible, because I think that is also the other problem that we've seen. So I'm young, so nothing can happen to me. Unfortunately, we've also seen the 28-year-olds dying of COVID. And yes, we can say some of them had comorbid conditions like an asthma or another disease, but it still happens. So there's a responsibility to yourself and to society. And so for me, what I've seen in the beginning, and it sort of surfaces every time that there's sort of a lull, is this sort of, I don't take ownership. It's not my problem. It's someone else's problem to fix. And unfortunately, it's something we ourselves need to fix. So let's now take this into the psychosocial environment, is to say, so what we've seen is those people who were unable to work in certain periods of time because they have a type of work they need to have social interaction. They were unable to, I mean, if the beginning, the building industry closed, and then we had other industries closed, not even talking about the restaurant and those type of industries, which was seen as non-essential. However, I think we've now learned it's almost essential for the mental well-being of a lot of people, not only for those who work there, but those who need that social interaction needs to go out. So in the workplace, we've seen obviously the burden of disease, people getting sick, your colleagues getting sick, some of your colleagues die, which has an impact on you in the workplace, but also the same happens to the family outside, which then impacts on the employer space, where I take leave because a loved one is in ICU, I need to take leave because I've got a funeral, so all of that impacted on us, whether we like it or not. So in the first wave, it was, they got COVID. And now in the fourth wave, it was, we've got COVID. I think it's come back to see it's real, it is a disease, it is devastating, and it's devastated society. And it's time that we take ownership of this, not only by looking at our own comorbid conditions, but also looking at the vaccine. If I can take up the vaccine, I need to do so. It's not only for me, protecting me, but it protects people around me. It protects my workplace. And I think this is where the employer space also becomes important, to say, how do I drive the taking ownership of my own well-being a bit further? And this goes to mental health as well. Because in South Africa, mental health is often seen as, it's a disease that you don't talk about. I can have heart failure, that's fine. I can have diabetes, it's fine. I can have whatever, I can talk about it. But I'm not allowed to seek help when I've got a mental problem, whether it be burnout, anxiety, depression, or any one of those. And I think there's a problem, is to recognize that we need to reach out to people with other diseases, but also that people with diseases, there's nothing wrong with it. It's like any other disease. We can reach out for help within our community, but also in our workplace. And the employer needs to understand that and support me as he would support anybody else with another problem. So in a nutshell, that's more or less what I see.
Fair enough. Thank you for that. Thank you. Jacques, how can small businesses protect or assist both themselves and their employees to face the challenges posed by the new normal?
Yeah, the new normal is actually different for every industry. The new normal, if you were more into the IT type of environment or the office-based environment, you now work at home. You now have your kids at home. So having to work at home with certain lockdown, that wasn't normal anymore. Then going back to your workplace with only half your colleagues there, not being able to really interact with the colleagues. So all of that's the new norm. But it also created other opportunities, for the employer to slightly exploit your own time, because it's now okay to have a meeting after hours because you're online in any event. I can now do it. And those sort of things. And I think we need to start looking at what's boundaries, what is healthy, what is not healthy, and how do you take that forward, making sure that you support not only your industry, but also the employees, to make sure that there's sort of cohesion and you still come out as an employer winning at the other side. But as I said in the previous question, I think it's taking ownership and not almost ignoring that it is changing. And I doubt whether it's going to go back to what we would see as normal as before. I think technology has been better established. We're going to see a lot more students going online courses and classes and only going in for practicals. And the same with workplaces. I think one would be going to see offices shrinking and more people having the flexibility to work from home for certain things. And accepting that norm means that we have to accept that there will be different social interaction patterns coming out of this going forward.
Mm-hmm. And then, Jacques, in your opinion, what are the key lessons SME employers can take from this to improve productivity for the year ahead, especially in light, of course, we could say the declining third wave and possibly a fourth wave?
Yeah, I think what we can learn from this is that because our vaccination is still just over 10%, we can see another wave. Another fourth wave is coming. We've now just gone through a third wave. The fourth wave is coming unless we get vaccinated up to about 70%. So the Canadians talk about the fourth wave of the unvaccinated. Mm-hmm. In the UK, we have seen, and I think that was a very good natural experiment to see that, yes, I can go to Wimbledon without a mask and I can do things. I will get more infections, but fewer hospitalizations. So the impact on society is lower purely because of the vaccination. So what do we learn from this? Drive self-care, make sure that you take care of your own diseases, whether that be a psychiatric condition, whether that be a physical condition. All of those needs to be taken care of to make sure that you're less vulnerable and that you don't have to take time off work in order to get better, to convalesce. It's better to be preventative, and I think that the emphasis here is on preventative care. I go for a blood pressure check. I can also fill in a questionnaire, or I can look at, am I on the brink of burnout? What am I doing in my office in a day? Am I productive? And when I'm an employer, I should go through the same steps. Do I have presenteeism, or with other words, they're there, but they're not working? If it's true, what is the underlying cause? So I think there's a lot of things that we need to stop ignoring and take cognizance of, and then preventative actions would then deal with those sort of issues. Early referral, early testing, I think is one of the things that we can really drive going forward.
Sure, 100%. I mean, you just turn on CNN or Sky News and you see it kind of belongs to the unvaccinated, and like you say, you know, it's a responsible thing to do. Lastly, Jacques, please would you update us on the latest facts about COVID-19 virus and yes, and again, the rollout of vaccinations?
I think, as I've said from the beginning, I think there's a lot of misinformation and interesting information going around and conspiracy theories, but I mean, it doesn't matter what you believe, the infection is real. If you've suffered it yourself and you had symptoms, you can attest to that it is real. Yes, people say, I'm not going to take the vaccine because there may be side effects. It's true. Any intervention, any medical intervention has side effects, whether you're taking tablets for your hypertension or for diabetes, mental health. If you're taking medication or a simple flu vaccine, there will be side effects attached to it.
Sure.
And the problem is we don't know everybody's unique response to, say, for instance, a vaccine. And some people may respond different than others and may experience some side effects, some just as slight chills of a fever, some may experience nothing, and others may actually have a devastating clotting disorder, which can be treated. Now, if you look at that, you also need to look at it in the context of how many people were vaccinated. So if you look at a side effect that happens in 1 in 6 million people, like a vaccine side effect that it's gone down to 1 in a million, it's not different from what we would suffer from childhood vaccinations. It's also that you see 1 in a million with side effects. A flu vaccine, also 1 in a million, you can actually get neurological damage with a flu vaccine in certain patients. Does it mean we shouldn't take it? No, because more people will die if I don't than when I do take it. So it's a balance of almost evils, for lack of a better word, is to say, yes, there will be side effects. Recognize that there will be side effects. If I recognize them early, I can do something about them and they can disappear. And I think that is I think the message that one wants to give you. Now, there are many different types of vaccines. South Africa, we've got the Pfizer vaccine, which is a 2-dose. We've got the Johnson & Johnson, which is a single dose. Both those vaccines have been well tested. Not necessarily in the South African context, but they've been tested worldwide. We've seen millions and millions of doses distributed. So the side effect profile of that vaccine is more known than a lot of other vaccines. So I think one can be assured that what we see in the literature published from those companies, it's true, the regulatory authorities, whether it's the FDA in the United States or whether it's the EMEA in Europe or whether it's a South African Health Products Association, they make sure that you do not expose people to unreal risk. And therefore, I think as soon as it's registered, the South Africans can feel safe and take up their vaccine. yes, we may have to have boosters in future because the virus will mutate, similar to what the similar type of viruses such as flu mutate. You may need a booster, and you may need it from a different type of vaccine that will come in future. But only time will learn, and I think it's one thing that we've learned in this pandemic is speculation is not a good thing. And I think let's stop there.
Dr. Jacques Slaymon, we're truly grateful for your insights and for your time taken this morning. And thank you for those insights. And I know that that well received out there. And also to our delegates out there, please note that the panel webinar this morning will be available on replay in case you missed some fine points there. Dr. Slaymon, thank you very much, and have a wonderful day until we meet again. Thank you. All right, thank you, Jacques. As we can imagine, it's an important topic, and we can never stop learning and understanding what's happening out there, and of course to all of us. Our next panelist this morning is, I'll call Nandi Molefe. Nandi, you can please join me on stage. Nandi is an entrepreneur, business strategist, and social media marketing specialist. And I had a wonderful chat to Nandi earlier on, well-traveled, of course, huge insights, social media marketing. Nandi, you do a lot of good things out there, and thank you very much for being part of the panel this morning. And again, we look forward to your insights. I'm just getting up my paperwork here, so I'll ask you the right questions. Nandi, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Great to see you this morning. And how are you faring up under the last 18 months? And I'm sure you're pretty well prepared for the beyond.
Well, all I can say, I mean, you have to take one day at a time, and you have to have a fighting spirit. You know, it's just been very interesting, very testing. And I think, you know, some important conversations have come to the fore, like today. I mean, I never would have thought something like mine, pushy conversation, but a lot of businesses have learned something like mindfulness is very important. It's critical. So yeah, so I'm very happy to get into this discussion.
Nandi, I've got a few questions for you, and let me kick off. Nandi, what have you picked up inside your own organization in terms of employee mental health and well-being, given the current challenges posed by the pandemic?
So Mike, you know, we work a lot online. As you know, we do digital marketing, we do social media management, we do content, we create content. And that's taken a really big toll, because besides normal work, we've realized that there's a lot of negative news that comes across on social media. You know, a lot of conspiracy theories that are consistently circulating. And it's not something that we can normally ignore like we would, because now, you know, these are actually attached to real lives, real stories. There's a lot of anxiety, you know, people, you know, have family members and friends who are falling sick, some themselves. And, you know, the of over information has become quite obvious to us, or at least quite prevalent to us. So that's created a lot of anxiety. The other thing that I've also noticed is that it's just been a bit difficult in terms of finding the inspiration to work and finding the freshness of mind, the newness every day when you're working from home. So, you know, these are the kinds of challenges that we found, and we're working through them as much as it's certainly put a lot of to find a new leadership style. It's difficult to be the leader where you don't want to be too familiar. But in instances like this, where you don't have, you know, a warm cup of coffee between you two, a nice conversation to catch up on, you really need to find ways to be more open and more connected, more, you know, you engage the passion, you engage the flow of the team that you've put together. And, you know, that's been, yeah, it's definitely tested me as a leader about how to draw that line and how to be patient and how to make sure that people are doing well in order to be productive, but also not, you know, taking advantage of the fact that there's so many variables and changes that we're facing.
Great. And Nandia, I think that we've lost your visual. Your sound is good, unless it's me. But I'll keep going. We can certainly hear you. And to our guests out there, I'm not sure if you can witness that. But Nandi, thank you for that. Let me continue. Nandi, how has the shift to work from home impacted workplace culture and work-life balance?
So, it's kind of interesting because, we've been ahead of the curve by the nature of most of our work being remote, because it's digital work, it's social media, it's conceptualizing, writing out, and sharing that and keeping tabs on what is going on in each industry that we manage. So that's been something that's quite useful. The only difference is that we have to be way more structured. So we've created a new schedule because everyone's mental health right now is a little bit more on edge with homeschooling and like anxiety. So one thing that we focus on is in structure and mindset. So there's this incredible, coach and neurologist and businessman in the States. His name is John Assaraf, and he says that, find flow, in order for you to find productivity, you have to have mindset and structure. So that's something that we try to do. I think there's something new, like online bonding, virtual bonding. So every morning, we'll find time to get together and to pray, and then we go offline. And then there's times in the day where we're working online on our own things, but we have our mics on and our cameras off, just so that feeling of having or having you, because that's how innovation is sprung. That's how camaraderie is built, and that's changed the work culture. Before, it was quite easy to just find times to meet and then find other times to be by yourself. But people are a lot more lonely and a lot more disturbed, especially when it comes to homeschooling. I've homeschooled 2 boys at the same time, and they love me a lot, but they don't really understand what a critical meeting is. And that's been a very difficult balance, but I found ways to make sure I have a structure. I don't book meetings back to back. I make sure that there's a certain time of the day that I'm walking, I go outside, I never eat my lunch at my desk. There's certain practices that you can put to make sure that you are keeping your mind refreshed and taking care of your mental health.
Mm-hmm. Nandi, thank you. And as a small business owner, of course, as you know, we're very focused on the SME environment. As a small business owner, how are you tackling employee well-being challenges in the context of the new normal?
So it's very difficult. They say the only human being that likes change is a wet baby. So, we have to make sure that we understand as a team what it is we're trying to achieve. We are very confident and well-rooted in terms of what the expectations are from each of us in a team. And, we learn how to pivot and to dig deep. So we have found that, I've been obviously reaching out a lot more, trying to understand what each is going through in their personal space, so that people can feel heard and feel as though they can find the space within them or find the power within them to be resilient and to be able to overcome some of the many boring days, lonely days, just this question of when is the 4th wave coming? Hopefully they don't close the booze again. It's very important to make sure that we have each other and we understand that we are connected and there's a greater vision. So we've definitely been a lot more focused in terms of outcome, but also in terms of also on the focus of progress and measuring progress. And when things are really difficult, focusing on pivoting. There's incredible benefits of getting through difficult times, because you learn how to pivot, and you learn this muscle of perseverance. Made it through the worst days of our lives, but on that day we always think that this is really never going to end, so it's just about drawing from the right mindset and making sure we have the correct structure to find flow and authenticity and that chemistry.
Sure, absolutely. And Nandi, and just a final question to you, how can SME employers foster a culture of well-being and support for the employees?
I think it's very important to learn different techniques and ways to be able to remove yourself as a leader, of course, and you talk as the owner of a company. When these challenges arise, you need to find ways to yourself and to separate yourself from the problem, so that you're able to apply a mindful, balanced way to address issues. And the problem in this kind of circumstance is that because there's a lot of pressure, because we are, working remotely, and there's just different factors. People sometimes can't log in at the right time. Sometimes people are sick. We have to find a way to make sure that we're not getting carried away with our emotions. So, it's about practicing the very basic principles of engagement and professionalism, and understanding that, your energy and your attitude is infectious. It's really difficult, but, you have to kind of coach people through from a distant mindset, and, find a way to make sure that you're not, blurring the lines between being a friend and being someone who cares and who doesn't want deliverables, So I would say it's definitely been a challenge, but we've also found ways to make sure that we laugh together. I'm very interested to know what people are watching. I may not enjoy it as much as other people do. We might have different tastes, but that still gives me an insight. That still gives me an opportunity to talk about something that is, just more of a casual human connection, which is what you need when you're building and you're being creative, especially. And making sure that there's some movement. It's really incredible. Walk can change your emotions, calm you down, or clear you, and direct correlation you feel. So I always do that, and I try to follow challenges and tackle on challenges. It's a moving target, but it's a very interesting journey.
Nandi, thank you. Thank you for your advice, your insights, and your contribution this morning. And although we lost your visual, your sound was perfect. And so we're very grateful that you've taken your time out again this morning, and thank you for that, Nandi. And I'm sure in time we will engage again. It's an important topic, and we can never stop learning and using this types of information to improve ourselves as employers, and as, of course, employees in the SME environment. So thank you very much. Truly grateful.
Thank you so much, Mike. I'll send pictures of myself since you lost the visual.
No, we had you the first half. It was wonderful.
All right, thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Nandi. Bye-bye. Okay, great. Thank you to Nandi Molefe. A great combination this morning. Truly engaging. Thank you for that. Our next speaker is Bianca Viljoen. Bianca is Marketing and Distribution Executive, a graduate from the University of Free State, Integrated Marketing Communication, Mill Park Business School, an MBA. Bianca has immersed herself in the healthcare industry, stretching over more than a decade. You've got a long CV here, so Bianca, I'm sure we can spend some time on that. But thank you very much. I've met you before. Truly inspired about your involvement in what you do, and of course in the healthcare industry. Thank you for taking your time out this morning for this invaluable. And often people say, during the pandemic, but it goes far beyond the pandemic. And I think it's a great way to start changing and tweaking and adapting now, because, we do know that in time to come, there will be different crises we all have to face. So it's a great time to adapt. But Bianca, thank you to you. Your voice, your mic is off. There we go.
There we go. Sorry about
Great.
that.
No problem. Welcome to you.
Mike, thank you very much for having me. And you actually said it. It's all about adapting. So from a healthcare funder's perspective, we can look at this entire situation, that COVID has brought about, and the lockdown, probably from a more high level perspective. So our learnings over the past 2 years have been incredibly insightful. We've done extensive market research, and it all comes back, and you touched on this earlier, to the fact that the workforce is your greatest asset. And from an employer's perspective, investment and smart investment into your most valuable asset has not become any less important than it was 2 years ago, but in fact, it's become a whole lot more important than it's ever been before. And that investment, is absolutely crucial to ensuring that your business remains a constructive environment, to bounce back from these circumstances.
Absolutely. And just a comment there from Corne Fourie. He says, whoop, whoop, Free State. Thank you, Corne.
Yeah.
I've got questions for you this morning, just to add flavor to what we're talking about this morning, Bianca. Bianca, can you share your learnings on how we can ensure a healthy, happy workforce to remain as productive as possible? I think that's the big question.
No, absolutely it is. So, businesses, and more than anything, small businesses, are now set to bounce back from these very challenging circumstances. It's been a dynamic environment, and businesses big and small, individuals in their professional, their personal capacity, have had to continuously adapt. And I think we're still adapting. From an employer perspective, it's like the one moment you have lockdown, your employees can't travel, and that's having an effect on their productivity. The next moment there's a whole new set of rules, and you've got to adapt to that. And all this has a massive emotional and psychosocial impact on the well-being of your employees. So again, coming back to the fact that your employees are your greatest asset, and we've seen a whole lot of companies reducing their employee benefits, or even eliminating it completely due to affordability. And if you can't afford what you used to have in the past, it's not necessarily the end of the world. But in order to support the productivity of your business, you've got to re-look at the structure of employee benefits that you have in place. And that starts with something really basic, something that gives them access to care. A basic entry-level medical scheme option that gives them at least access to preventative care benefits, a COVID vaccine, a doctor's consultation when they need it at a private facility. So it really is going back to basics and really reviewing what you maybe had in the past. If you don't have anything at the moment, but you see that your employees' health and well-being is being affected by these circumstances, do a constructive analysis of what your business needs. Because at the end of the day, you need to now again start building and start constructing a productive workforce. And it's very difficult. We see it every single day. Keeping people positive, and keeping them productive at work. It's probably one of our biggest challenges. So to ensure that they remain as productive as possible, ensure that they have access to care, in a nutshell.
Yeah, thank you for that. And what can SMEs put in place to facilitate wellness and self-care?
So the pandemic has, as I mentioned, re-emphasized the importance of looking after basic healthcare and well-being. So employees' well-being and productivity is really affected by a host of personal circumstances, as well as their social and personal healthcare environments and challenges associated with it. So investment in their well-being we see as the starting point of building a business, of looking after your workforce to ensure that they will in turn look after you. And this really includes support services in terms of basic programs. So again, affordability always comes into play, but there are options out there. Like Agility, for instance, has a free employee wellbeing program that we give to all our clients. And that gives employees access to a 24/7 helpline for what we call the more fluffy stuff, or really what we used to call, the fluffy things. And that includes stuff like having access to telephonic psychology services. I mean, just being able to pick up the phone and and speaking to a psychologist or someone that can assist in mental support could be a make or break, difference in an employee's life. Very often employees don't have, that confidence to go and speak to an employer about whatever issues they might have, whether it's work-related or personal. But this well-being helpline gives them access to that resource, to give them that peace of mind. And the Agility Corporate Helpline also gives them access to financial support and advice, legal advice, and healthcare advice. I was actually speaking to a client the other day, and she was sitting 12 o'clock at night with a baby that wouldn't stop crying. She knew that her medical scheme emergency room benefits had been exhausted, and she didn't know what to do. She didn't have money just to fork out and go off to the hospital. And she actually called this helpline, and they managed to give her the basic advice for the moment, and then she managed to get to the doctor the next morning. So that very little, access, I think it's little, but that basic level of access to services has now had an impact on that person's productivity at work the next day, because she might have had a better night's rest, come back to work the next day knowing that her baby is okay. And so again, basic services is usually the starting point. And then preventative care when it comes to healthcare, even if you have medical scheme benefits in place, you've got to really, objectively look at those benefits and think, are you getting what you pay for? On Health Squared, the medical scheme, for instance, we've actually given members more benefits this year than they had last year, because we firmly believe that the more that you're able to go and see a doctor, the more you'll have the ability to look after your health proactively. I mean, if you're not feeling ill, but again, on the one hand, your GP benefits have been exhausted, you're kind of just going to sit at home and try to self-medicate and, not necessarily get any better in order to get back to work and earn an income. And giving more really contributes to better outcomes. And that is both from a funder's perspective as well as from an employer's perspective. And then we also find that for organizations to facilitate wellness and self-care is driving awareness of mental and physical health is absolutely crucial. Mike, we've seen it so often, employers are frazzled at the moment. Employers are just trying to make ends meet, just protecting the bottom line as far as possible. But in that process, the more they get frazzled, the less they can focus on the well-being of their employees. And those campaigns kind of drop off the radar. So we sincerely urge employers to drive awareness, and care for employees, make them feel cared for, make them feel valued at work. You know, a whole lot of companies have gone through retrenchments, and they've had to let people go, and most of us have, you know, even lost colleagues due to this COVID pandemic, and all this is having a massive impact on our ability to work productively. So driving awareness about these things, and ensuring that employees know they have some level of resource that they can go to.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely right, Bianca. Thank you for that. And of course, you know, research and what we all do know is that increased well-being has a direct impact on productivity. What support services in this regard would best address your needs as a small business owner?
Yeah, Mike, so I think that it all comes back once again to basics. Jacques actually touched on it earlier, and you know, proactively identifying health risks within your workforce has a significant impact on the company's bottom line, but also on their ability to work efficiently. So I would really suggest any sort of employee benefit to be considered would be something that gives you access to preventative, services, something that gives employees access to the vaccine, or to basic GP consultations in the private setting, and even something like a dentist benefit. That could go a long way to ensure that employees are at work and not stressing about their healthcare. So SMMEs and role players really have so many resources. I think it's just the matter of sitting back and thinking about what you can afford in order to drive the well-being of your workforce, and that starts with basic healthcare benefits, sort of primary care level, and access to preventative care services.
Right. Bianca, Filion, thank you very much to add to the insights and flavor this morning. Important subject, as we do know. Conversation will continue long after this, and we're very grateful for your time, and I know you're very passionate about the SME sector and solutions for that sector, not only of course, but as part of what you do. So thank you very much. It's really inspiring.
Thank you, Mike. It's been a pleasure. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, our final panelist this morning, Jean, you're welcome to join me on stage. Jean Royf, a traumatologist. This is certainly going to be interesting. Jean has a BS degree and advanced diploma in traumatology. He has been working and practicing in human sciences for 16 years. He currently conducts physio education and EAP counseling for psychiatric clinic, and also provides private trauma facilitation. Jean, thank you very much. Truly grateful for your involvement this morning. A huge subject, and of course much needed at any time, but I would say pretty much especially now. There are many people out there who are in distress, and of course who would love to hear your insights this morning. So a big welcome to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mike. Thanks for having me.
And Jean, Jean, to end off in a note from this side is, as you say, from the dramatic increase in the amount of people actively seeking help for mental health issues. What is your take on that, Jean?
Well, we've definitely seen quite a big increase in people seeking assistance, which is good and bad news. I'll touch on that a little bit later. But something that we have to understand, a kind of a why to this is, and this is something that not a lot of people have caught on to, is that we have essentially experienced a worldwide traumatic experience. If you go, and I'm not going to get into it right now, but if you go and look at the elements of what trauma is, the whole world has experienced that. So it's really no surprise that we have seen quite a big increase. And speaking to colleagues and people in private practice have just underscored this, and also said they have seen many, many more people coming and needing assistance. Part of that, if you look at it from a trauma perspective, is that we, above our, let's call it normal everyday lives, working, kids, etc., we suddenly now have had to deal with so much more in order to deal with, let's take something as basic as being safe, social distancing, washing your hands, and wearing a mask. Those are three tiny little factors, but it's three things that I'm adding onto my day. Now, if you speak to most people, they will have already told you that a lot of people will say to you, I'm already feeling overwhelmed. Now you're adding on to that. And now I've got the added pressure of, am I going to get sick? Are my parents going to get sick? Husband's wife, etc., etc. So the whole thing has just really extended all our pressures. And as I say, we're definitely dealing with a worldwide traumatic experience. So yeah, that was no surprise.
Yeah, absolutely, John. And even coming from the SME environment, as you would know, running an SME at any given time is tough. And, we do know very few people who start out as a small business survive the first 1,000 days. So add to the flavor of that trauma, and of course,
Absolutely.
We've seen it in the hospitality and tourism sectors, coupled with the disease itself, and of course, with the strain it's put on SME families has been horrendous. Jean, what is your top piece of advice for anyone who is struggling with their mental health?
The first and foremost advice is to go and seek help. I think Jacques mentioned it earlier. We have been very, to use a word, lackadaisy about mental health. A part of it is stigma. There's this whole business of, if you seek mental health assistance, you're crazy. And nobody wants to be labeled as that. So that's partly why people have let it be. Another one is that in South Africa and other parts of the world as well, it's been it's not so bad kind of attitude. It's not so important kind of attitude. So my biggest piece of advice would be is to seek help, and seek it as fast or as soon as you possibly can. Not to say that it can't be dealt with later on, or if you've had something that's been hassling for a while, but the sooner the better. Like with any illness, be it mental, be it physical, the longer you leave it, the harder it is to recover. So as soon as you find perhaps burnout, perhaps your depression has gotten worse, perhaps your anxiety, as I just mentioned, your anxiety has flared up or has gotten worse or has gotten out of control, it is better to go and seek assistance for that. It just makes that difference between survival and really living. So yeah, that's the biggest thing.
Sure.
And of course, we'll get to this in a minute, but also to take care of yourself.
Yeah. And John, another questions that are coming through, where does one start? Who does one go to? Right now I'm under enormous distress. I'm highly depressed, despondent about things. Where do I start?
In order to get to, for example, a psychologist or psychiatrist, it's one of the simplest, easiest ways, and this is where a lot of what we've been speaking about this morning, having benefits, having the option to do that, is to simply get to your GP and contact them and say, look, something's up, I'm not quite sure what it is, and let them have a look at you and then refer you where necessary. Of course, there's other places as well. You can talk to ministers, religious leaders, community leaders are often in touch with the right people. Then you get places like SADAG. And I'm almost loath to say this, but consult the internet as well. I'm loath to say that because one of my big driving forces is to limit social media. So yeah, but there are many places out there. It's really not hard to get in touch with someone that can either point you in the right direction or actually help you.
Right. Great, John. Thank you for that. John, what coping mechanisms can people use to best deal with their mental well-being?
one of the big ones is self-care. And under the banner or the topic of self-care, there's quite a lot that goes into that. I think Nandi mentioned a few of them actually. One of them being diet. What we eat plays a huge role in how we feel. So looking at what we eat, again, I always say this, I'm not saying you can never go for that hamburger, but you can't only go for the hamburger. So what we eat plays a big role. And then another factor that people don't want to hear, but is true, is to exercise.
Sure.
And there, whenever I mention this, people, I almost see them wanting to run away. No, you don't have to become the next Olympic athlete. 30 minutes a day actually makes a significant health difference in a person's life. And if that's truly impossible for you, then at very least, if you do go to a mall, or if you do have to go fetch something, walk there, use the stairs instead of the lift, that kind of stuff. Get a little bit more physical, because it does play a massive role. I'm going to ask you to stop me when you're ready, Mike, because I can talk about this stuff the whole day, actually. I'm just mentioning.
No.
And again, under self-care, there's a portion that is very regretfully, very seldomly looked at. And that is me time sort of / downtime. Meaning that, yes, it's good to work. It's good to keep busy. It's good to get that exercise, etc. But you've got to take some time for yourself. You've got to take time to reconcile with yourself, to have a chat with yourself, if I can call it that, to make sure where you are, to make sure what's important for you, to basically regroup and have quiet time as well, and be able to work from that, and be able to take energy from that, so that you can actually function better later. And it's something a lot of us don't do. It's something a lot of us don't even think about, but it's actually seriously important.
Sure.
Specific to the pandemic, it's something that I've been driving a lot, and that is, there's a few things that we need to look at, and a few things that we need to have in place. Now, a big part of this is general, and as far as the pandemic goes, is to have boundaries and discipline, essentially structure. And in there, one of them is, as I mentioned, is limit the social media and limit media in general. Get your news, but also make sure that you get it from a decent source. But your social media, and as we now know, your false news and that, it creates more panic. It creates more unsurety. And that unsurety and panic is actually a big driving force behind people feeling anxious, perhaps things like depression becoming worse, and so on. So really try and limit that. Another factor that plays a big role is, although I have seen on the chat section here that a lot of people are saying, I've been working from home, it's been great, I've had to go back to the office. If you're still working from home, we've been isolated for a while and in various different levels, but social connectedness is still important. Yes, do it safely. Yes, put all the practices in place, but it is important to have a face-to-face with someone, to still feel like I'm part of a family or a society, or as we're talking, a workforce. The things that Nani and them are implementing are actually great. So that is still very important as is me time, as I mentioned just now. So these are all things that we have to think about and that we have to put in place. And it sounds like a lot, but once you get into it, it's actually not that difficult. And then lastly, on this topic, I want to mention, start controlling what you can control and stop worrying about the stuff that is out of your control. You can't do anything about it anyway, but some of us spend a lot of time and mental energy on, what about this? What about that? What about the next? It's not something you've got control over. Deal with what is and deal with today and the things that are within your control. And you'll feel a lot better for that.
Yeah. John, you 100%, what we always say, like we've got these talks on the subject of, focus on what's important, not urgent. Like Warren Buffett has always said, learn to say no to almost everything and almost everyone, and focus on purely what's important. And
It's very true.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
John, in your experience, are certain people more or less predisposed to developing mental problems, and how they deal with these issues?
Mike, yes. One of the aspects that we have to consider is genetics actually plays a big role. The genetic cards you've dealt, we are more or less predisposed to having mental issues like depression, like anxiety. So that's one of the aspects that do play a role. And then we also have to look at things like circumstances. They do take a toll as well. And then, of course, life skills. Life skills actually play a huge role. I was actually speaking to someone yesterday, and I said to them, the more I deal with people, the more I see people, the more I learn and read, the more I become aware of how important perception is. Not to say that you will develop a mental health issue simply because of perception, but it can definitely make it worse or better. A study that I read a while ago actually had people related to anxiety showed that if you look at a stressful situation as a challenge and are of mind that it's not affecting you negatively, you will overcome it without a whole lot of negative side effects. But if you take those very same elements and view them as out of control, terribly negatively impacting, that can actually have negative physical impact on your health, of course, as well as mentally. And then, yes, different people deal with mental health different ways. And that's why when you ask me, what should we do? My first answer is get help, get assistance, because, and this ties in with what we're saying, if I don't have the resources, if I'm not sure where to go, if I do think my medical aid is depleted, or I simply don't know, then a lot of people start self-medicating, which, as we probably know, is not a good idea, and it has a huge knock-on effect, and of course doesn't address the issue. Some people, it overflows into other spaces of life, whether it's family, whether it's work, and that generally can have negative effects. But on the flip side, there are people who do some of the elements that I mentioned earlier, and practice the saying of the nose and has structure in their lives, and they actually cope with it fairly well. But we can't delude ourselves. You can be the fittest, most structured person on the planet, and if life deals you certain cards, at some point you're probably going to feel it. You're probably going to have to say, I need some assistance, or at very least to go and speak to someone. And I always say to people, let that someone be a professional, because they're just going to be better for you in the long run.
100%. Jean, my last question this morning, and my last question is for you. What other channels can people follow in order to get help when dealing with stress and trauma?
Apart from taking care of ourselves, there are, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, there's a South African depression and anxiety group. There are various support groups around the country in different communities. A good idea would, and I always suggest this, is to teach yourself, to learn a little as to what is and what isn't, what I should focus on and what I shouldn't focus on. And that goes back to taking care of ourselves. And then not forgetting your counselors, not forgetting your, as I mentioned earlier, your religious leaders. And one of the big factors that if you truly cannot get to a professional, find that trusted person in your life, and at very least, can I call it that, offload to them. it's amazing how it might not fix the problem, but it'll definitely alleviate it. It's amazing how much better we can feel by just saying, I'm feeling X, Y, and Z. This is happening to me at the moment. So, and having the realization that A, I'm not alone, and B, someone has heard me. There's almost never a reason to let our mental well-being go down the drain, if I can call it that. There are so many opportunities and ideas and things that we can do with it that it's really not necessary. As I mentioned earlier, one of the things that we just need to get rid of is the idea that it's not important, and B, that there's a stigma related to it. We need to get rid of that so that people feel, can I say, freer to actually do that.
Take that burden away. Absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah.
John, well, thank you very much for your insights, advice, new thought process, and to help others out there really to take that initiative. And if you really are in some form of trouble, to take that first step, because it's quite okay to do that, and focus on what's important and have that me time. And John, I learned a great deal. Thank you very much. It was wonderful having you part of our panel this morning, and I'm sure we'll meet up again. And I know that our audience, our delegates out there, found it equally as fruitful. So thank you to you, and all the very best to you.
Thank you very much, Mike.
Okay.